as you were saying, like being present and taking that time to appreciate it. And so hopefully, like, people are having, and there's been a lot of talk about like labor shortage and people not wanting to go back to work right now.
I
But I
know.
think it's actually a positive thing. Like our society has been poisoned by this gig economy, like late stage capitalistic idea that we all are like freelance agents, that, we're all, it's like, it's been like a really negative experience, I think. And companies like Uber are like, that's a completely other discussion that like I would love to have. The fact that Uber has never turned a profit and is considered this blue chip company is
Oh,
its own issue. But people are finally like getting a chance to like really value the now and to put like their own life and like just general like good well-being first. And so I see that as like a really positive turn of events, and hopefully that will encourage us to get off our cell phones and stop thinking about what other people have and really appreciate what we do have.
FOMO, you said it earlier, right?
Yeah.
FOMO. It's
Yeah.
always like, oh my word, I wish I were there. I wish I were there. Well, Gabby, when you talk about hype, like where do you see social media going? I mean, what's is it is it going to be is it just going to fade away, or is it just it's become such an incredible part of this world now? Like, what do you predict?
I don't see it going anywhere. It is funny, like I'm 32, and for the first time, I'm starting to be like, oh, like I don't quite understand what the kids are doing. Like there's this younger Gen Z is on TikTok, and so I think it will permeate and mutate. But we are living online now, for better or worse, and it isn't just the internet. It is part of our reality. Like it is a real thing. Um, and so I don't think that's going anywhere. But I see TikTok as almost like a positive shift because it is less materialistic, less about conspicuous consumption. And by the way, and I'm curious your take on this. Like I think my hypothesis is that Billy McFarland's brain was a little bit poisoned by that really conspicuous consumption that I think started to like really peak in like 2012, 2013 with that whole rich kids of Instagram thing. Like my theory is that he wanted to be a part of that, and Fire Festival was a way for him to live that lifestyle and then to sell that idea to other people. And if the money hadn't run out, he probably could have pulled it off. But unfortunately, he had spent most of it on his own private jets and on bringing models to hang out with him.
There you go. It's funny. My relationship with Billy obviously was pretty close, and I mentored him for for a period of time. And when he started Magnesis, which was the little black credit card company for 20 somethings, and he was living in a loft in Soho, and I don't know how many members. Let's say he had 300 or 400 members. He'd already started promoting it, and there it was: discounts to privileges to priority treatment to getting into restaurants, to gyms, to experiences, to Blade helicopters, to on and on. He was going out there and really negotiating some pretty incredible relationships, which cultivated into great discounts and priority treatments for all these members. And a friend of mine called me and said, gosh, Annie, it was New Year's Eve, and I hadn't met Billy yet. But Billy grew up in Short Hills, New Jersey, and I grew up in the neighboring town, but spent a lot of time there. And so our families were all sort of, all connected one way or another. And a friend called from Short Hills and said, Andy, listen, there's a guy named Billy McFarland. He's a kid. He's having a New Year's Eve party. I think you need to get over there. He's promoting this company called Magnesis. Now, I had been profiled on the front page of the Wall Street Journal a few years before as America's first corporate concierge. And it's a concept that I developed and launched it at PepsiCo at their world headquarters, where I went out and I negotiated with every brand I could and every restaurant, every theater and whatever, to bring great value and cool things to Pepsi employees. And that was KFC, Taco Bell, Frito-Lay, Pizza Hut, California Pizza Kitchen, Pepsi, down the list. And as I was profiled on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, one of the big things that happened was that I had this buying power, and I could bring things to people that they'd never had before, because I could call anybody and I'd say, oh, can I get theater tickets to Hamilton? They'd say, oh, sorry, how about next year? And I'd say, well, let me explain something. I am the head concierge at PepsiCo, and we have over 250,000 employees. And before I could even hang up the phone, there'd be a car waiting for me outside, bring me to the city. They'd wine and dine me, because I don't care even if you're Hamilton or Le Cirque or the best restaurant in the world. There's some nights you can't fill your theater. There's some nights you can't get people into a 5 o'clock reservation to go out for dinner, and on and on. I was able to kind of fill those voids for them. And so I became very powerful in that way. But as the concierge, I really began to understand what people wanted, what they liked, and what they needed. And so when my friend Donnie called me and said, listen, you need to get over there. He's trying to launch this black credit card, but it's quite funny because he's got a keg of beer and these long 10-foot long hoagie sandwiches. That's never going to work, ever. I'm like, oh my word. So of course I arrive and introduce myself. We're all chatting away. And the next thing you know, boom. Yes, I moved Billy into a brownstone in the West Village, and we get a butler that helps. That was me. And
that was the best part of his whole business.
Yes. And I outfitted the kitchen and bought all the platters and the cutlery and had the beautiful reclaimed wood tables made and all the, the clear plexiglass Louis chairs. And I hosted 44 events for Billy for free, and art openings, chef's dinners, small concerts.
One of those, by the way, and I was struck by how beautiful that townhouse was. So I have to say, you did a very nice job.
Thank you. And so I feel like I'm one of the roots of Billy's, of part of his demise, but not, listen, he grew up in an affluent area and he understood. But Billy was always socially awkward, Gabby, as you know. I mean, and he created a lifestyle that he wanted everybody to envy him for. He bought the Maserati, and then he hired the driver, who kind of worked for me too. And I'm like, Billy, she said, listen, Andy, I need to pull up at every club with a Maserati with a driver and get out. I'll never have to wait in a line again. And I'm like, believe me, I used to go out to LA constantly with my work. And I joke with a friend of mine, and the first thing I do, I'd say, okay, there'd be a couple parties that were going on. I'm like, I should go to one of these parties, but I'm like, I don't really know them that well, or blah, blah, blah. Boom, I'd go right off of Sunset Boulevard, and I'd rent a Mercedes convertible or a brand new Range Rover. It didn't matter, whatever. And I'd spend $1,200 for 2 days in the damn car. But I'd pull up to a party, and if I didn't have a driver, I'd be driving, whatever. But because I looked great with my Gucci shoes and my Rolex, and I pull up in a Mercedes convertible, they're like, good evening. I say, hi, I'm Mr. King. And they, oh, Mr. King, welcome. And I'd walk right in. And that was sort of Billy's design too, where he developed this whole imagery, and he just kept saying, Andy, trust me, like, this is really, really important. And I understood where, when I was first opening my event business in New York City at 30 years old, I bought a brownstone in the West Village, which I completely restored, and was absolutely beautiful on Bedford and Leroy Street. And I was way in high on that. Boy, at 30 years old, what was I doing with a $5 million house? But I'll tell you what, like, and then I got a car and driver, and I always had a car and driver waiting out front. But that's the image that I needed to be able to host some of the most elaborate, successful, very expensive Wall Street parties, was that all my Wall Street clients loved it. And they immediately like, Andy King has the best taste. Look at him. We've been to his home for dinner parties. It's beautifully decorated on. And those were important things. Now, I was able to demonstrate my level of style. And so Billy was kind of trying to do the same thing, but then take it to you, but Gabby, right, with hype. I mean, yeah, hello. Like, are you kidding me? The models, the jets, that he just went way overboard and then couldn't deliver.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I do think that is a very distinctly like American archetype and like method, right? Like the fake it till you make it method is like embraced and encouraged and celebrated. Some of like the greatest like leaders today and businessmen today had to bootstrap and had to like pretend that they were doing better than they were. But I think where Billy went wrong is at a certain point he kind of like started drinking his own Kool-Aid, and he forgot that he was putting on a persona to get to that next level, and I think truly started to believe that he was at that level and that he could do whatever he wanted, and that he was a private jet guy and not just pretending to be a private jet guy.
Exactly. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's just sort of, he began to lead, he was living his dream but then living a lie, right? And I think, is that a lot of what happens with social media today, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you just start as an influencer, and the next thing you know, you're just in so deep. There's no turning back. There's no, and I believe me, as Craig and I are shopping, house shopping right now for a house in the South, and we'll, you get to a point where it's like, okay, we have a certain amount of money. We can buy a really big house that's 40 minutes outside of town, but absolutely stunning, or a much smaller house that's closer to town in a better location. And I'm like, but I'm Andy King. Like, I can't. And then I'm like, who gives a shit? And frankly, if you're happy, right? But think of the world of influencers today where they just fall into that trap where it's like, oh, no, no, no. I have to drive this kind of a car. I have to lead this kind of a lifestyle to continue to be who I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, well, I think a really interesting example of that is the Kardashians. And
Oh,
I delved into a little bit with that. Obviously, it's funny because they were involved in marketing fire. But, Kylie Jenner, who clearly is making hundreds of millions of dollars a year, like is very successful, according to Forbes, was so desperate to be known officially as a billionaire when in fact she was maybe like an 800 millionaire, right? Like it's not like she was pretending to be rich, but she needed that signifier and that title so badly that according to Forbes, she forged tax documents in an effort to convince them to bestow her that title. Like not even like the richest, most beautiful people, like the most revered celebrities in the world are immune from that pressure. It's kind of wild.
gosh. And then you think of the young kids, right? I mean, this is the scary, scary piece. I mean, the pressure. And I mean, I don't want to get morbid on talking about like suicide rates with teenagers, right? I mean, but they don't even have to leave their rooms anymore
Yeah.
and they get completely bashed about something or whatever. But that to me is so worrisome, right? On how do we, you know, as me now as an influencer in my own little way, I just try to be, we get comments every day and we'll get one, obviously it's controversial when I came out as a gay man, at 30 something years old. But then last year, announcing that I'd finally found the love of my life, Craig McBlain, who happens to be, well, he's just turned 27 years old. And so some of the hate we would get, like, that's disgusting. You're like a grandfather, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, oh my word, really? Like, I finally found love for the first time in 58 years, I said, or 59 years. Now, 90% of the people are like, oh my God, Andy, you guys are the cutest couple. And, how wonderful. Like, we cook together, we garden together, we do everything together. And
Adorable. I really enjoyed spending time with you guys.
yeah, I mean, we're so lucky, Gabby. But then you have like the haters, and you have the people, and the average person can just cave in on that pressure, and you think about all the younger kids that I did a podcast recently with a cute guy, young guy named Carter Kaler, and Carter I knew as a cool tomboy when Carter was a girl, and now Carter's going through the transition and really lucked out on doing a deal modeling for Converse, and Converse is like, hey, let's embrace this whole transgender issue. Why not? It's a common thing that's going on today, and encourage these kids to be who they want to be, and don't be poo-pooing them, and don't be scaring them, and don't try to pass legislation that they can't go to the bathroom here and they can't, I mean, it's just crazy. But think of the power that the power of negativity through social media too, and how do we block that, and I'm just trying to change it a little bit every day, because all the kids will say, hey, you're so cool, I wish you were my dad. Like, it'd be fun, my dad, like, yeah, we belong to a country club and we have a boat, but we also love to garden. And yeah, every once in a while, if I'm up against the wall, I'll suck a dick every once in a while if I have to. And kids are like, you're so cool, I love that, I wish you were my dad. I'm like, oh boy. Well, but think about social media in that way too. I mean, I don't know, the pressure. And every once in a while I'll say to Craig, I'm deleting all social media. I don't. He's like, Andy, you can't do that now. At this point, in your career with what you're doing and trying to, trying to spread love and